do a lot of diligence in support of those deals. And we're increasingly, I think, we're a flatter team now than we maybe have been in the past. So we have a much broader purview and a lot more responsibility than we have. And I think Dan and I are both getting exposure to a much broader subset of different elements of these deals than we had in the past when we were maybe more siloed.
Yeah.
So that's been a real advantage. So
and you get to
Dan, you've been
on
more
both
focused on
ends
the
of
auto
that.
side recently. If you want to, do you want to give any comments on kind of
Yeah.
how that's different or how that works?
So I manage all of our auto ABS transactions, so the asset-backed securities for auto. And then on the auto side, so I do the ABS. We also have something called a warehouse and something called, we have tax equity on the auto side as well. Just same thing. We get tax benefits from those cars and we don't need them, so we pass them on. Warehouse, I don't know a ton about, but it's basically we get leases and we put them into a special purpose vehicle and we take out a loan from, let's say, a bank, and we pay back that loan with like the green section here, the cash flow. So those leases pay us money and we use that to pay back the loan. And then, auto asset-backed securities, which, working on a couple of those deals now, is just, 36-month lease. And what's interesting about them actually is it's the calculation of how to do it is pretty simple. If taking corporate finance, it's just use an NPV calculation, right? So if we just think of one lease that's going to be paying us $500 a month for 36 months, you just take an NPV of those cash flows, and that's the securitization value of that car. The only difference being, if you remember from corporate finance, you have a terminal value. Often you used a perpetuity, right, to calculate where that company is going to grow into the future. With an auto lease, the terminal value actually is the residual value of the car, which is what the car will sell for in the pre-owned market, right? So you add that to the end of your cash flows, you take the NPV of that, and then you do that for 1,500 leases or 15,000 leases, and that's your securitization value. So you end up with 15,000 leases that's worth $700 million, and we take that $700 million, we tranche it into, like Matt said, we're not tranche it, but we divide it into different notes, so A, B, C, and D. They each get their own ratings from the rating agencies. They pay out at different interest rates, and every month it's pretty simple. That pool of leases, the 15,000 leases, generates X million dollars of cash. So let's just say it's $8 million of cash, and you run that through a waterfall. You pay everyone what they're owed, and you just keep doing that until you pay it all back. It's actually pretty simple. The modeling for that is kind of something that definitely I understood. Just
auto ABS is simpler than solar
yes,
tax equity there.
It really is, and that's why I'm glad that I manage the auto ABS. But
and I think on this, Dan had touches on all of our different product types. He's got pretty broad responsibility, but I think in the context of tax equity, I think just from a policy perspective, as many of you probably know, like the investment tax credit for solar is currently stepping down and phasing out, and barring any, it looks like someone has a question about that exactly. I was just getting into it. About the federal ITC phase out, right? So that's a good question. And we're currently at 26%, I think is the current rate. It was originally at 30%. And that's going to step down, I think, annually for the next several years. And as a result, I think we're doing less tax equity. And we're also, as we mentioned earlier on, we've shifted away from the solar lease and PPA product type, which was the primary source of originations that we use to raise tax. And now focus on the rental product as well as more cash and loan solar sales. So on that note, we may also bring, I think, solar loans in-house. We don't currently do that in-house, but that's something that our team may take on in future years. Is actually originating the loan product and managing transactions that finance those loan cash flows. And to date, we've used third party partners to originate solar loans, but it's definitely an area we're interested in moving into. So in terms of the ITC, I think it is, barring any federal action on extending the ITC, I think it is likely that tax equity will become a less important mode of investment in solar. And I guess the question really is, like, solar has become so, like, solar components, the modules and the inverters, all the different elements have become manufacturing scaled. They've reached economies of scale and cost has gone down. So the question is, do you still need a tax credit to subsidize solar investment at this stage? And from my perspective, personally, the answer may be no. It's been a big driver, but the point, I guess, from our work, if the deals are long lived, they're typically 5 to 15 year partnerships. and a lot of them still have many years to go. So, and the debt deals are even longer term. So many of these transactions will last long beyond the ITC.
Yeah.
Um,
But like when you say
and
any experiments, like Matt said, bringing the loans in house, or like that rental product we were talking about before, we want to finance that too, right? But
mhm.
if you guys just think about it, when we're talking about solar leases that last 20 years, there's a lot of investors that like that type of product, pension funds, just in general, long-term products. Like who are the people that buy them? It's usually like sovereign wealth funds, not that we have that, pension funds and insurance companies, right? They have outflows over long term, so they want those stable inflows over long terms. But then we take the rental product, we can't go to these investors and say, hey, here's 20 years of contracted cash flows. Because like I said before, they can cancel at any moment. So when it comes to experiments, it's weird. Like, how are we going to convince investors to take on financing this riskier product where you can cancel at any time? The cash flows are not, contracted. So people are definitely thinking about that.
Yeah, so we probably, and then I guess the EV tax credit, of course, it's already no longer. We did one auto tax equity facility for EV tax credits, and that's already kind of come and gone because we've produced too many cars.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably enough on unless there's specific questions on the financing side, we can probably
Move
pause
on.
there on that. There's a question from Paul on the chat about opportunities for veterans who have extensive leadership skills and are looking to enter corporate America for the first time. So that's a great question. I'm not a veteran. I know that Dan's not either, but I do know of many veterans who work within the company and are in kind of maybe a broader. They maybe have a broader set of opportunities that would be open to them given the leadership experience and kind of the operational experience that a lot of veterans have. I know that I've encountered veterans who work in field service operations. So like for servicing our solar fleet, we definitely have veterans who work in roles there, essentially manage field technicians. That's maybe not so much of a SAIS role, but it's definitely one that's extremely relevant, and I think would line up a lot with some of the operational experience and leadership skills you developed in the military. But there's also just people who work on finance teams also who
I met with someone the other day who's financing role, and he was a veteran. And I'll
yeah.
also say we have a veterans program at Tesla. So yeah, like you said, is there a special hiring program? I don't know how it works exactly, but I think if you go to tesla.com/vets, they, I think we're told to direct people to there and check it out and see what they're offering. Because like Matt said, those skills are definitely valued, and there's plenty of people here who are veterans, and they have a special program with it.
Yeah, if you're interested in just general kind of field operations, I mean, our service and delivery operation, our field service operation for all of our charging network, like those are all areas of the company that are really growing fast and are in need of people who have energy and resilience and grit. I think because it's a tough one out there. So look into those are kind of specific roles that you'd be interested in. But there's definitely kind of more corporate roles as well. People in program management for a number of different areas of the company. It could be like a new vehicle launch. Yeah, there's all kinds of program manager roles within the company that could utilize those skills. Let's see. There's another question here. Model 3, but do you think Tesla will offer another similar priced model in the future? Also, do most people lease Tesla then upgrade after their initial 36-month lease? Good questions. You can maybe speak to that, Dan.
I don't, as far as offering another car goes, I don't think that will happen in the foreseeable future. That's kind of what the Model Y is. Maybe prices might be adjusted. We're a really fluid company when it comes to that. We just lowered prices of Model S, X, and 3, all of them the other day, actually, just by a couple $1,000s. But the Y is really the next big change for that, because as I said before, I'm pretty sure the top 3 cars sold in America are pickup trucks, and the next 3 are all the crossovers. And I don't know the numbers exactly, but I think they say that a Model 3 over 5 years or 7 years is cheaper than any of your typical sedans, Camry, Accord, Civic, all that. So I don't think that we're going to offer another similar price model in the future, just because I don't think we need to. I don't know the number off the top of my head. We calculated the other day, just if you go to a normal auto company, you calculate how many configurations of cars you can get, every model times a permutation of every model with every option, it's huge, and ours are much less than that. I think we like that simple approach.
We'll
And
need a
then
new we'll need a new acronym.
yeah,
S
I don't know if people upgrade.
S3XY.
I don't know if people upgrade after 36-month lease. It's an interesting question because I think
Don't
a
we
lot
don't
of
we want
people.
to keep our cars after the 36-month lease? We want to have a robo
Oh
taxi fleet,
yeah,
right?
I just think more if that. I don't know if you meant Theo, just more like if they're going to an S or something after. That is true. So you cannot at the end of our leases for Model 3s, you can't buy it out because we want to keep those for ourselves right now. But a lot of people do buy it out. A lot of people extend their leases or get a new lease or trade it in. I think for the most part, once people get Teslas, they don't go back to other cars because generally that's not the type of consumer they are anyway. Um, but I don't really know if people see the 3 and then want to go to an S because a lot of that performance you get from an S you can get in the 3. If you look at how we're classified uh, by auto like kind of agencies that analyze auto cars, we are actually, even the 3 is still considered like a luxury car actually, even though it's priced competitively and low. It's an electric luxury car, so it's still really fast. The inside is not like any other car that typical car you're probably driving. So I don't know if people upgrade. I think a lot of people still love the 3, and you can get a performance of the 3 if you want to upgrade as well. I don't know if that answers the question. I don't have an exact answer, unfortunately.
And it might be helpful also. I don't know if we could just talk about maybe what our day-to-day is like a little bit, just in terms of, we've talked about the skills we use, and I think you mentioned that we have these high level deals, right? That we have investment partners, and we often are just responding to performance questions, doing all kinds of mixed. It is an extra-facing role as well as internal. We respond to a lot of requests internally, but I think the highest pressure requests come from outside sources, and a lot of it is kind of driven by the performance of the underlying assets. So
Yeah,
I don't know if what's your view on that, Dan? Do you have I
just
think I spend probably 60% of my day in Excel and the other 40% in a combination of Outlook and SQL, probably.
yeah, mostly Excel and SQL. For me, I think I try to spend as much time in SQL and out of Excel as possible because I hate Excel. I think it's a useful program, but it's slow and it's terrible when you're working with big amounts of data. But yeah, just answering investor questions, fielding responses, and we do a lot of just general reporting that we just have to get through.
Ooh, good. So here's some interview process questions. So
Yeah,
I can probably talk about mine first.
sure.
As I mentioned, I was hired about 3 years ago, and my interview process, I think I first applied. I actually did an informational interview my with my manager who hired me on the SF career track in 2016. And so I stayed in touch with him. We had a couple of conversations, and I think I prepared pretty well for those. So I kind of treated my initial calls directly with him as interviews themselves. So I did some research and kind of got some details on the specific goings on in the industry as it relates to to this team. So one example of a point that I brought up was that we had recently shifted or that Solar City had at the time had shifted primarily to cash and loan sales as opposed to lease and PPA originations. So that was just a little tidbit of something that I read in the news that was useful in the interview, and I think made an impression. And I think my second call with him, he connected me with another kind of relevant finance person, and then we had another. I think I don't know if I think he reached out to me actually after our initial informational interview and let me know that they were hiring. They had a position open, and that he put my name in the ring. And I think for my first, I can't remember exactly the timelines, but I had initial phone interviews with the recruiter. And that was kind of just an initial 30-minute screening, and then they passed me off to another round of phone interviews with my initial contact, who was the hiring manager. And then once I got through that round, just kind of a phone screen with him, I talked to his boss, who was the director of our group. And then once I passed through that, I think I moved on to the modeling interview, which was on Zoom, and they give you a prompt, maybe I think it was 48 hours in advance of the call. And the prompt was, well, maybe I shouldn't give you the prompt, but it was essentially build a basic financial model to outline kind of operations of an everyday business that you'd find.
It's pretty
kind of
open-ended.
with revenues and expenses, and just kind of come to a view. And I guess you're supposed to form a presentation and a recommendation for investment, whether or not you would invest and why. Um, that was, but for different directions, and it talked how they came up with assumptions, what was their logic, and then of course the Excel skills are also very important, and the logic of how the model was put together and built, and how you think about the return. It's basically just the different metrics you use to decide what was your decision making framework for whether or not you invest in this business. And then if you do well in that, then I think at that point maybe there's one more round of phone interviews with kind of more senior leadership and a couple other folks that aren't immediately relevant to your team, just kind of adjacent teams who would maybe have a different perspective. In my case, I talked to a lawyer, and I talked to someone who was in corporate treasury, and I talked to a finance analyst in the capital markets team at that point, as well as the VP of our group, who's also now the treasurer. And once you pass through that round of, I think, 4 30-minute interviews back to back, then you all on Zoom. Once you get through that, then you would go on site. And then I had another round of panel interviews and lunch with the team, and then I think a factory tour at that time. And then I think I didn't get the offer until 1 or 2 months later. It was a drawn out process. I think it took up 4 or 5 months from start to finish from my first phone screen to the point where I actually received an offer. And there's a lot of we were in pretty regular contact, but there definitely is waiting involved. And it's not always clear what's going on. So Dan, I know your experience was similar, but there's also an extended period where you were waiting. So maybe you want to talk through your more recent process.
I'll just add on some brief things. Like, my process was similar, that it took a long time, maybe a little longer, because I was coming in at a time where there was a hiring freeze. And so I was just patient. If it's what you want, I wanted it badly. I just waited and I was patient. Same thing with the interviews. I never had any in-person interviews. Actually, it was all virtual. They gave me an offer before they could fly me out. They said we can either give you an offer or you can come out and check it out. I'm like, I'll just take the offer. That's fine. I don't need to see anything. I needed a job, so that was fine. I would just say, just like within the interviews, as far as the type of questions that were asked, it was definitely the more of the, what do you call it, like the qualitative, not the quantitative questions. No one was asking me, behavioral. No one was really asking me anything super hardcore financy. They were asking me the behavioral questions, the typical things you can all think of, I'm sure. And then also, just like Matt kind of said before, have a story at the different levels, like why Tesla, why this market, but also why that job. Like, I had an argument of why I wanted to work in a specific role that I tried to develop as best as possible. I just thought that was important. And everyone at Tesla is kind of a nerd about Tesla and some part of the technology. Like, even if you're like, you just have to be really into like batteries or something. I really love batteries. So I made that clear in the interview, and I think that's helpful. And I'm just looking at the other questions. Quickly, just
talk about the work culture, quality of life.
Yeah,
I
came from a paralegal background where I had no quality of life, period. I was working like over 100-hour weeks every week for 3 years. So for me, I think there's actually a pretty decent balance here. Other people might not think so. But the quality
I think
of life is great.
other teams are often under like more severe operational constraints. I think our work is more cyclical. And we definitely have days where we're very busy, but it's not as intense as maybe some other operational roles within the company.
Yeah, but it does feel like a startup. Even though we're not technically a startup, the culture is definitely startup-like, because things are always changing. And at any role you are at the company, you need to be able to handle 10 other roles that maybe are not really on your team, but you have to do them anyway because no one else is doing them. Or you need to be able to talk to other departments about things that you don't understand. So, like, we talk to field service agents for energy side all the time, but talk to other departments about auto. You just have to be able to do that at a company like Tesla that is a startup, which makes you a stronger person, but definitely makes the work harder at times. And just things happen that change things. Like recently, this was public. We got rid of using a big application called Salesforce, and we took it in house. So things like that, which might not happen to other companies, such a huge change just happens, and you have to just roll with it and make do and figure out.
We're very focused on cost and resources.
Yeah. And how much of it is driven by Elon's personality? At least at our level, Matt. I don't know if you disagree with me. I don't really think that our roles are driven by Elon's personality that much. The perspective, the view of the company on the outside definitely is mostly driven by his personality. That's what people see as the company. But from the inside, my day-to-day work does not change that much based off of Elon's personality, I think.
I think, but at the same time, there are pretty quick strategic pivots that I think do come pretty much directly from decisions from
Probably.
Elon. So he definitely does
That's
exert
true.
influence on the operational sides of the business,
Yeah, a
which
lot of
does
influence.
sometimes create stress that wouldn't otherwise be there.
Yeah,
And there's often pressure to do things more quickly than some companies would opt to do things.
definitely. And with maybe slightly less resources than other companies, you just got to put it together.
I think generally I would define the company culture as do more with less.
Yes,
I think
I
we're
agree.
often we're often reducing we're always finding ways for cost savings,
Yeah, and that
and that's just so as Dan mentioned, it kind of does require a bit of willingness to do work that maybe you don't feel you were hired to do. But you also it's an opportunity, right, to learn a lot of kind of new functions and kind of learn a bit more about other areas of the business. I think you really just want to be open to taking on those challenges.
yeah,
Drawing boundaries, of course, but also if you want to get something done quickly, sometimes you just need to drive the process yourself. Especially with us, it's a lot of it's data issues. Like you can't always rely on an IT team to solve data problems for you at the pace that you need. We often need data sooner than it can be made available by the teams that are specialized in the area. So we often have to kind of put it together ourselves.
and that just kind of reminds me of just a general career search issue that I think we all had, and that you're all probably gonna not an issue, but you're gonna encounter is a lot of people, depending on the roles, especially finance roles, are gonna look at your resume and they're gonna see SAIS on there, and they're gonna go, "What is SAIS? Why do I care about SAIS? Why didn't you get an MBA?" And it's hard to make people understand that because they don't know what we study at SAIS. So you do have to think about how you can market SAIS being really great. And one thing that connects to kind of what Matt was saying is something that I use, and I think honestly I didn't come up with it. Someone at SAIS, maybe in career services, helped me. Is just make an argument about that. Although we're kind of all generalists, we're not just glazing over things at SAIS at a high level. I mean, you're getting really specific about a lot of things at SAIS. You all have to learn so much in 2 years. And I think if you can explain that in an interview, like, hey, I was forced to learn all this different stuff in 2 years. That's why SAIS is incredible. That helps when, I use that when I was interviewing, because that means that when I get to a place like Tesla and I have to learn all this stuff really quickly to do 10 different roles, I can do it because I've experienced doing that at SAIS. Like, it's not necessarily the information I learned at SAIS, but it's the ability to learn all this different stuff at once and be an expert on it all, right? I think you all are very capable when it comes to that level. And I think you can market yourselves, with that. And that definitely helped me with getting the role here. Because people are probably going to ask, like, oh, how do you deal with, obviously stress, or how do you deal with managing multiple projects at once? And you all have a lot of experience doing things like that, and that definitely makes you stronger candidates.
Um, Dan, were you partially addressing the question here about non-finance roles?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. So a lot
So
of, I don't know, Matt, how much you know. I would say, like, I think supply chain is another area that there's a lot of opportunity in. At least when I've seen, we get an email sometimes about the careers openings that are there. Supply chain has a lot that I think SAIS people can offer. Um, as
business
far as
development is another one that I think would be maybe
Yeah,
kind of
business
more finance
development.
oriented, but that's maybe more oriented towards market entry and strategy.
Yeah, and
Is
as far
is
as like policy and regulatory, I've never actually seen an opportunity for it. I know that I think there is a filter for that on our careers website. I haven't seen the opportunities pop up, but I do know that we have teams that are working on that sort of thing. And marketing is also something that we don't do advertising, but we do have marketing roles that do pop up here and there. But obviously, being a company like Tesla, like, a lot of the opportunities that pop up are kind of finance or engineering. I think those are the most that I see come and go. But um, I do think, yeah, like Matt said, business development, supply chain, I think those, are great
there's
opportunities
just
that
a
you
lot
can
of
develop.
general program management roles
Yeah,
that are kind of like internal consulting people who are just brought in to solve a very specific problem.
yeah,
And often those types of you might be hired for your general intellect, your past experience, and and you might be deployed to solve one problem for like 3 months, and then you move on to a new problem, like a new program, right? Maybe it's the Model Y launch, maybe it's
Right.
kind of mobile service, maybe it's
Definitely.
the solar roof. There's business development specific roles for different products and different business
Hmm.
lines, because there's so many products and so many different revenue streams that we're trying to build out in this company, that we always need smart people to strategize and think about how to do things most efficiently.
Yeah,
To just yeah.
that's like what you said, Matt, before about, service centers expanding and superchargers expanding. There's issues like that that need smart people to come up with good plans at how do we tackle these issues. Um, do either of you work on the
Yeah,
Hyperloop?
does that answer the question though, generally? I'm familiar with the Hyperloop, but that is
No, it's
that's
probably
a
Boring
separate
Company. It's
that's
probably
a
Boring
separate
Company,
that's a
right?
separate that's a third company. It's not SpaceX or Tesla. It's
But
in the
is it is
Muskosphere, but
is it the Boring Company that does Hyperloop then probably?
it's the Boring Company. Yeah,
Yeah.
and they're not
They're,
officially they're just digging holes. They're not
yeah.
officially
Right now they
doing
are boring.
Hyperloop yet. I think everyone
They're boring
assumes
holes.
it's Hyperloop play, but it's not necessarily.
No, I don't think the
You might just be
Hyperloop.
digging tunnels for
I don't
Tesla.
know if the Hyperloop has any real plans. The Boring Company is making real tunnels that you can drive through, that have potential to change things. I think they built one. They keep for NASA as well. I think has some sort of tunnel, with Boring Company or something like that.
Hmm.
And SpaceX, we don't work with SpaceX at all. But I just saw a headline in the news the other day. This is just me seeing. I didn't know about this, that Tesla did exchange some workers to go help SpaceX with something at some point. So I do think there is a relationship between the two companies like that, where you know workers might, if you're probably more if you're an engineer, might bounce back and forth and do things.
There's a question here about international students, and we offer visa sponsorship, and I think we generally do. I think it's more. I think it does require a higher level of approval. We actually do have an international. We have a
On our
non
team.
non U.S. citizen on our team, and there's plenty of those folks in the company. But I think it is. It probably is a bit more difficult to get hired if you're coming from a non-U.S. citizen background. But it's definitely possible. I think in the current environment, in kind of COVID-19 world, um, I think there's definitely more sensitivity around that. But hopefully that's temporary. I think but yeah, the answer generally is yes. I don't have a whole lot of specifics on the current policy, but I expect that it would be similar to other companies that you'd see. There's definitely also roles available in Europe and roles available in Asia, um, and
Yeah,
really just I think it's primarily those three continents where maybe if you're from either from China or from an Asian country or from a European country, you might have an easier time getting hired in those locations.
and those markets are growing and they're really, really important. It's not like a side, like, oh, I work with Tesla in Europe. I mean, that's where we're going to see a lot of growth, obviously, especially with China. So those are definitely coming up. Going to be some exciting roles in those markets as we expand more. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions, or if we didn't cover anything.
Yeah, we're kind of reaching the end of our time here. I want to make sure we're respectful of your time. Looks like we've gotten through a lot of the questions. I don't know if there are any last minute ones that anyone wants to ask, or if you guys have any sort of last minute or closing remarks that you would like to give to students and recent grads.
I don't know, Matt, if you have any from your career search. I mean, I would say like network as much as possible, and use, whether it's career services at SAIS or maybe your department has its own network. Just talk to everyone and anyone you can, and obviously go into it looking for information about whatever you're interested in. But also, just the more people you talk to, the higher the chance that one of them goes, "Oh, I heard of this opportunity, or I heard of that opportunity, or I can recommend you for this and that." But just constantly be trying to network with more people, because I think that's unbelievably helpful, and that's one of the best ways. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, that's just one of the best ways to get a job. Honestly, is someone internally being able to help you out. It's just kind of the way it works, unfortunately. Matt, I think you're
Hey, you're
muted.
muted.
And that's anywhere, not just. I'm not talking about tests. I'm just talking in general.
I was meeting, but yeah, so I'll endorse Dan's comment there, and I'll piggyback on that by saying, I think network, of course, but also be very strategic in your preparation for any given networking conversation. I think doing just kind of basic research and having demonstrated some interest and some knowledge of the person's work, or basically the work of the person that you're going to be talking to, will catch their eye a little bit. Definitely does for me, and I think that was helpful for me in my process. And then really in every conversation you have, the more people you talk to, really try and zero in on defining that job function. Just define the different types of roles that you think you would fit in, and how different companies talk about those, what they call them, like what types of jobs are there. And I think that is the best starting point for really getting people to help people within companies, as Dan said, understand where you'd fit in. And not being too general. I think trying to be open, of course, but be as specific as possible about the type of job you're looking for. And I think you learn more, kind of debrief after every conversation you have, and kind of start trying to build that definition in your mind so you can talk about it in a clearer and more intelligent way.
Great, that's really helpful. So you guys are comfortable with students reaching out and saying, I'm interested in a job at Tesla, or would you prefer that they make a connection with you first? We hear different things from alumni. Some are like, be very upfront. Others feel it's kind of off-putting if someone just reaches out because they want a specific job. They prefer to sort of talk to the person and make that connection before they bring up their interest in a position. What is your take on that?
My view is to convert job up front, just because you do want to kind of have some knowledge of who you're recommending for certain roles. Obviously, if it's applying for our team, then that's up to us, of course. But if I'm going to reach out to someone within the company here, then it's probably someone that I'd like to know is actually a good fit for a certain role. I probably wouldn't just. No offense to SAIS students, I think generally they're quite sharp, and I'm normally happy to recommend people. But I think probably better to establish a fit for a certain role before they reach out directly. Maybe if they have a role that they're interested in, they can certainly include that in their initial outreach. But I think we want to have a conversation first before I would just directly recommend somebody.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what we recommend. Yeah,
I think that's the safest bet to go for most job searches. Personally, I'll be honest, I hate that about the job market. Actually, I wish that people were more comfortable receiving an email that says, "Hey, I saw this job and I'm interested." Because for me personally, I prefer actually the transparency and just being straightforward. Like if someone emails me and says, "Hey, I want this job," I'm going to still be like, "Okay, let's talk." Matt knows I'm kind of more into radical transparency than I am anything else. And I think that it's an unfortunate situation that you have to kind of tiptoe when you're doing these things. So I would recommend, just act like you're networking, even if you secretly just want to go for a job. I mean, let's just be honest here. Like that's what a lot of networking is, right? You're emailing, you say, "Hey, can we talk?" What you really mean is, "Hey, can you get me a job?" And I think that's okay to have that idea in the back of your mind. And people, when they get the email, they might know you're saying that, but you got to do this dance, right? That's just the way of the world. I'm just being totally honest. And I hate that is the reality, but it is. So I will say, if any of you ever see a career at Tesla and you want to email me, you can directly say, "Hey, I saw this job posting. Can we talk about it?" I'm okay with that. But in general, I think Matt's correct that, again, like I'm not going to recommend anyone anyway. I'm still going to want to talk to you, because when someone recommends you, you have to remember at any company, they're putting their reputation on the line to put your name in. And I will say I've been burned in the past. Like I recommended someone at my old job and they were a terrible candidate. And that's my mistake. So that made me look bad. So you have to remember that when you're asking someone to recommend you, you're asking for them to personally vouch for you. So you want to convince them that you are a good candidate and, that they can put their name behind you. So that is important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's what we typically recommend. Thank you so much for your insight on that. So I think we're at 5:30. We're about out of time, but I want to thank both of you for your time today. If you are able to share the slides, please, or if you want to edit them first, please share them with me. I'd be happy to distribute them to the group. And if it's okay with you, to maybe other students who were not able to attend today. And just want to check in with you guys, make sure it's okay to share your emails with students that were on the call today. Also, SAIS is now encouraging us to share a lot of things on LinkedIn and Twitter and stuff. So as long as you guys are comfortable with that, I think Matt from previous career tracks, I think that's something you're okay with. But Dan, if you prefer not to have your name or photo included in that, just let me know. But
that's okay.
Yeah, that's a new initiative that across Hopkins, they want us to be, sharing our events and stuff to the extent that we can. So we appreciate you guys being willing to do that.
I think that's great.
So, so thank you all again. This is really, really helpful, and look forward to hopefully doing the trek in person next year. But love to do another, virtual one as well, because I think this works well as well. So,
yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us rant for an hour and a half.
Yeah, this was great. Really, really helpful and insightful. Thank you both so much.
Yeah, hanging out there. It's a weird time in the job market. So just
Yeah.
stay patient, and keep networking. That's what I'd
Yeah,
say.
absolutely. Well, thanks again for your support, and look forward to keeping in touch with both of you guys.
All right.
Thanks,
All
Julie.
right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.